on this current issue, Black Lives Matter, they want to call it. I don't actually agree with it, but I'll explain that to you later. I do believe with the cause, but I don't follow the organization. I think there's a lot we can discuss, obviously, with a subject like racism and discrimination. But it's, you know, as you all know, racism is very complex and complicated and multi-layered subject. It isn't something that you could have a discussion in an hour, 2 hours, or even 3 hours. You couldn't even do it in a week. It will take you quite long because of it's a multi-layered and complex subject. So tonight, what we're going to do is just go through our basic understanding of racism, identity difference, and discrimination, and then work from there. I wasn't actually sure who I was going to be addressing today, whether it's going to be young people or old people or a mixture of the both. So some of the slides that I've prepared, I'm going to skip through because it won't be relevant. And I even prepared something for young children as well, like primary school age, but we'll skip those. Anyway, so if you want something to say, or you've got a point to make, please feel free to do so, because I like to be interactive, and I don't like talking and people don't understand what I'm saying, or they would like me to clarify what I meant. It's always good to get feedback whilst you're talking at the same time, rather than leaving it to the end, because people might forget what you actually said. So, and if anybody's got anything in addition that they want to add, then please feel free to do so. So let's begin. So well, this is just about the organization that I put together within the past year. So we won't talk about that because it's not relevant at this time. So in this session, we will present what is identity, the various identities, the origins of identity names, and even the origin of humanity. In addition to that, we will talk about racism and discrimination, black on black racism, tribalism, and is identity really important? There will be other subjects, other issues that will be interwoven into what we're talking about, but that will be the main basis of what we're talking about today. And I suppose the real reason why we're having this discussion is because of the George Floyd event in America, which has triggered numerous protests all over the world. The shocking scenes of him being murdered live on camera caused highly emotional condemnation all over the world. In fact, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you. It also opened up many discussions over the issues of racism and discrimination and historical injustice against oppressed people, all oppressed people, but in particular, Black people in particular, or people, those of African heritage. So many young people became involved in the protest marches. I had parents phoning me up, and some of them were concerned. They were asking me, what is this all about? And is my daughter, is my son? And I said, yeah, of course. But you should have an open discussion with them about why they're going and what it is they're going there to represent. Because as you know, when people go to protests, when people go to marches, not everybody there has the same. You know, some people will go to a march because they sincerely believe in what the march is for. There are others who are opportunists, and they will just use that opportunity to seize and politicize the movement, as has happened with this Black Lives Matter, where there's all kinds of people there saying that they're representing them or joining them. There are others there who just want to go there and riot. You know, you've got these anarchists and anti-establishment, anti-government groups, and they just want to smash buildings, smash shops. They want confrontation with the police. And then you've got another group of people who just want to rob shops. You know, they want to cause chaos and just rob shops. So that's all part of protests, unfortunately. And it's a small minority that does that. But unfortunately, the media tends to highlight that more than the majority of people that are going there for the right reasons. So, but before we start talking about those things, I'm just going to have a little warm up. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Weird having it. So
yes.
So here's something I'm going to do. So you can actually put your microphone on if you want to respond to it. This is a game. There's a little quiz, and what you got to do is name the place of the face of the person that I'm going to show you. Just have a guess, and just once you see the face, just guess where do you think they are from. And I think you're going to be in for quite a few surprises. So. Any guesses on there?
Where? South Africa?
South Africa?
South Africa, I think.
Sri Lanka?
I think so. Could be.
Nearly. This is Indonesia.
Oh.
Yeah, Indonesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ethiopia.
Near.
Yes, East Sudan. East Sudan.
No.
Somalia.
One more. Somalia. Somalia is correct.
Somalia.
Yeah.
Okay. Well done, Muna.
Yeah. But these are not absolutes. Don't forget, because these borders are quite loose and quite open.
Yeah.
So you've
True.
on both sides of the borders as well. So if you said Ethiopia, yeah, maybe you have a lot of Somalis who live in a place called Ogaden in Ethiopia. So it could be.
Nigeria. Okay.
In Australia.
Near to Australia.
Near to Australia?
Papua Guinea.
Where?
That's the Papua Guinea.
Papua New Guinea. Who said Papua New Guinea?
I said Papua Guinea, yeah.
Yeah, that's Papua Guinea. That's Papua Guinea, yeah. That's Papua New Guinea.
Well done.
Now these kids, they didn't bleach their hair. They didn't go to the shop and buy any bleach. They're dark-skinned people, but their hair grows blonde, naturally blonde.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. So if you just go and Google it, you'll see that there's loads of them who live on these islands. It's not just Papua New Guinea. There's other islands where you'll find them as well.
That is in Mali.
Near. Next door to
Niger?
Mali.
What's
Near.
Senegal?
Keep going.
Is that in Niger? And
This is the south of Libya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sahari.
If you're talking about the south of Libya, if you're talking about the south of Libya, then that would include Niger as well, because as I said to you, the borders are quite porous. So you probably find this area is called the Fezzan, actually, in the southern part of Libya.
The Fezzan, yeah.
Yeah, it is a neighbor, but west of Sudan.
Yeah. You'll find these people in Chad also, in Niger as well, in the south of Libya. Won't get that one.
It's Libya. South of Libya.
This one? The last one? No.
Mauritania?
No.
It's
No, I
Jordanian.
think Kuwait. Kuwait.
No.
Iraq.
Near to Kuwait. Keep going.
From Kuwait, I think.
This
Jordan?
is Iraq. Iraq.
Iraq?
Yeah,
Iraq.
yeah. From Basra.
Oh, Iraq. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we said it already in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Ethiopia.
No,
should-
this is from Sudan.
Maybe as well.
She looks Sudanese.
Yeah.
That is true.
الفيديو السودانية.
I have done this presentation 3 times, right? And no one has guessed this first time. No one. She is Sudanese. I'll come-
Mauritania, maybe?
no, she's from Sudan. I'll come back to her
Yes,
in a
Sudan.
minute. I'll
Yeah.
come back to her.
Mm.
I'll come back to her in a minute. I'll come back to her at the end because
I
it's,
thought
it's,
that she's from Sudan.
yeah, she
Mm. الفيتشرز
الفيديو.
السودانية.
الفيديو دي ما عجبتكم؟
Yes, I said what?
He's from Sudan. So today you're going to learn something about her today because I like people to sort of, to at least pick up some new information. So we'll get back to her when the slide is finished. Because nobody knows. No, I bet nobody can tell me who she is, but we'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Yep. See that one down at the bottom?
أستراليا.
Max, Brazil or Mexican?
أستراليا.
Australia.
Mm. Australia.
That's the Aborigines, yeah.
Yeah.
Jamaica.
Yeah.
One of the islands, anyway.
I just put that there, but it could be from anywhere.
Where?
India.
Yeah. This is from India, and it's the south of India.
Okay.
Sudan.
Could be.
Is
Same.
Eritrea?
Similar hairstyle.
It's not Sudan. This one.
No.
It's not Eritrea?
It's Eritrea, yeah.
Mm.
But
Well,
again, like I said to you, the borders are porous. So
No.
there isn't a line in the sand between Eritrea and Sudan. There's no wall there. You find the same people on both sides. But this
Yeah.
picture is actually Eritrean.
The way she plaited her hair is
Mm,
not Sudanese.
yeah. Okay.
Mm.
That's interesting.
That's Senegal
Nigeria.
It's Nigeria, yeah. Yeah.
area.
Mm.
Could be anywhere, innit?
Yeah. Sudan, maybe from the.
No, it's from London.
From where?
London. How about this one?
Wow.
I think it's ours.
Somebody
Somewhere in
mentioned it
Africa.
before.
Sudanese?
No, they
No.
live in the Sahara. They live in the Sahara Desert.
The Tawarik.
The Tuareg, yeah, that's
The
right.
way she does her hair, yeah, and this ring as well. No,
Sorry?
the earring and the way she plaited her hair is not Sudanese.
Yeah.
The ring is different, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, the earring.
He's Sudanese.
No?
No,
No,
the thing
Yemen.
she's wearing, the thing she's wearing.
Somalia. That's from
Necklace.
Somalia.
He's Somali.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's Somali, yeah.
If you look again, you will see properly. Now you should get that one.
Sudanese or Mauritania.
Oh,
Oh,
Mr.
John Garang.
South Sudan, Sudan.
From Sudan.
Sudanese.
The Sudanese.
Yes, John Garang. Allah yarhamu.
John Garang.
yaghfir lahu, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Sudanese. This is This original Kenyan. Sudan. Number one Kenyan. Sudanese. This is Kenyan.
Kenya, yeah. Kenya or Tanzania. This is the Maasai.
Kenyan.
Maasai.
This is the
Masai,
Maasai.
yeah.
Yeah, this is the
Very,
Maasai tribe.
Very distinct, very distinct features that they have.
Mm. Ethiopian, that one?
Last
No,
one, this one.
That one is from Mali.
No. Wrong side of Africa. The other side.
Yemen. It's Yemen. Oh, Oman.
Oman. Oman.
Oman, yeah.
Oman.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, she's a khanjar and these things. Yeah.
Ah, Elamin, is that you? I know your voice.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
All right. How are you, man?
Morocco.
Algeria.
Yeah, fine. Thanks. Are you?
Not Morocco, next to Morocco.
Algeria.
Tunisia or Algeria?
Mauritanian.
Mauritania.
Yeah, it's Mauritania.
By the dress.
It's from West Sahara, isn't it?
Tunisia or Algeria.
Morocco.
Morocco. Yeah.
It's
المغرب
Hassaniya.
المغرب العربي.
Okay. What do you, I mean, the point of that exercise was to show you that there's crossovers in how people look, and it's not easy to kind of determine where somebody's from, although there are some giveaways in the hairstyle and the dress and the facial features, but oftentimes people, you can't really tell where they're from because there's a lot of crossovers between them. And so that's the point of the exercise there, to show you that although there is differences between us, there's also a lot of similarities as well. And that's the point. That's the point of the exercise. So you've got cultural continuity as well. I bet you can't get this one. Yeah. This is Egypt.
Yemen?
That's from Egypt. That's from Egypt. Yeah.
Egypt.
Egyptian or Spain as well.
Nelson Mandela, South Africa.
Hey, you could never get that one wrong.
Looks like Yemen.
Yeah.
This is Zulu.
Yes, Zulu from South Africa. Yeah.
Ethiopian.
No.
No, South Africa as well.
No, this is
That's-
like the Central the Africa.
Yeah. This is from the Congo.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, from the Congo.
Oh, cool. Dawa Algeria.
Algeria.
Yeah, the flag.
Yeah.
The flag.
From the flag.
This is a flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, so we're looking at cultural continuity and also physical continuity. So if we're going back, especially talking about the Nile Valley, the people are more or less the same as what they were 3,000-4,000 years ago. It's more or less the same facial features, the same hairstyles, and the same color, obviously, and the cultures are also, there's been other kind of mixes with other cultures as well, but basically it's more or less the same as what it was all those years ago. And all you have to do is look at the images and the sculptures that they've got in Egypt and in Nubia, then you can see that for yourself.
Mm.
Not much has changed at all. Yeah. Okay, that was good. I hope you enjoyed that. That was another one there. So, okay, going back to that woman. Remember I showed you the woman and you said she's Sudanese and you didn't know her? Okay, her name, you should get a pen and write this down actually, and or you can get your phone and Google it. But I don't know what her name is, but she was known as Princess Korka. And she was an actor, Sudanese actor, who played a leading role in 2 films, Egyptian films. And she played a character, well, Korka, that's a picture that you see of her on the right-hand side is her arriving in London. And they actually nicknamed her Princess Korka. I don't know why, but that's what the media nicknamed her, Princess Korka. And this picture was taken in 1937. And she starred in a film called Jericho with a famous actor called Paul Robeson. So she played the character called Gara in a movie with Paul Robeson. It was released in 1937 and called Jericho. And on the left-hand side, you can see where there's a newspaper article, but the writing is too small, but it says that she's the daughter of a sheikh from the north of Sudan. And that's her there. So Princess Korka. But I don't know her full name. I just know that's the name that the British media decided to call her. Yeah. So let's get into identity. What is identity? The distinguishing character or personality of an individual or your individuality. So identity, essentially, when it's talking to you as an individual, it's talking about who you are and what you are. Your age, your name, where you're born, your ID card, your national insurance number. That's a form of identity. It is specific to you. That's one form of identity. Second form of identity is the condition of being the same with something else described, which is, again, we're talking about being in a group. So it's just more than one. And three, you have sameness or essential or generic character in different instances, which is similar to what I just said before. Identity can also be your political stance, and it could also be your religion. It could even be what football team you decide to support as well. You know, identify with supporting this team, identify with supporting that. So identity has many characteristics as well and many layers. It's essentially who you are. It also includes all these additional attributes such as language, your geographical location, your food, your nationality, the dress, and your facial features, and of course your gender. So in Africa, they in some African tribes, the issue of identity is really important for them. So much so that they actually, I'm not sure whether the facial scarring was purely just for tribal reasons, or in other cases it was for beautification, or maybe it was a combination of the two. However, it seemed to be at one time the kind of social norm that existed amongst people, where they felt the need to actually do this, to self-identify themselves as belonging to this or that specific group. Personally speaking, I don't like it. But again, I wasn't around at the time when they decided to create those social norms. And I think now you're going to find that is kind of dying out now. So you wouldn't find people doing that these days, unless you're talking about people that live in the villages. Oh, and another reason is for medical reasons. Because my father has got, or he used to have two cuts on the sides of the temple of his forehead. And these were not tribal scars. He just said this was a kind of medication that he said. So I don't know if you've heard of that before, but
Infection for the eyes infection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have it in Sudan.
Okay. The two cuts at the side on both
Yes.
sides of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
both sides.
So common identity terms, Black people, that's what the subject is about today, is Black Lives Matter. It's very commonly used globally, but is it the reality? You know, it's quite, to me, it's a debatable word to use, because if we're talking essentially about the color black itself is an absence of light. And there isn't anybody really black, to be honest with you, just that there isn't anybody white neither. So it's used as an adjective to describe people who have varying degrees of brown complexion. So I'm just going to show you like all different people who would be classified in this time that we're living in as black. And as you can clearly see, there's clearly different shades amongst them, but all of them will be classified in that group, even though they might not necessarily classify themselves as that also. Negro is an old word which has its roots in Spanish and Portuguese. And the word negro itself, it just means black. That's all it means. It's part of the Spanish and the Italian language. But they used to use it in England and in America, but now it's deemed to be offensive if you use this word negro. However, the word Negro itself, it just means black. And if you call somebody a black person, really, you're calling them a Negro, to be honest with you. So I don't see the difference. But then again, it depends on the culture. It depends on the social norm. It depends on the change in times and how people use words and the context of them at the time that they're using them, because context and social norms change. So in English, the word black in the English dictionary, the definitions of the word black is related to darkness, to dusky, to sadness, to depressing, somber, mournful, funerals, disastrous, calamitous, sinful, evil even. It's most of the time, the use of the word black is quite negative.
Sorry, so do you think the word nigger is offensive?
I'm coming to that. That's definitely part of it, because the word nigger is the word nigger itself actually means black, because it's from the word Niger. But we'll come to that in a minute, because I'm going to talk about, again, I said there's context in how people use words.
شغالة ده.
Okay.
كلمته ولا رسلت له؟
In reality, Afro heritage people are brown skinned, from the deepest dark brown, which appears to be black, to medium brown to light brown. And it is said there are 52 shades of brownness. Yeah, because you don't get shades of black. Black is black. There's no such thing as light black, dark black, middle tone black, but you do get shades of brown. You get dark brown, the very, very darkest brown, which look like it's black. You get medium tones, and then you get light brown. And these are the colors of the people that are known as Africans or African heritage people. These are the colors of the people that are known as black, to be honest with you, and it's really brown. So to show you what I mean, to give you an example of how this word is controversial as well in its usage, because it could mean, black could mean something in one country or in one culture, but in another culture, it means something totally different. So my father, for example, he never referred to himself as a black person. It's only when he came to England that people started to call him that. But when he was back home, he didn't refer to himself as black, if you understand. He only went by his tribal name, and that's how they self-identified. They didn't identify themselves by a color. And it's similar in other African countries as well. And Brazil, which has the highest black population outside of Africa, they have 100 million people of African descent in Brazil. They also have like their own codings and how they describe themselves, and it's not the same as the one in America. It's totally different. So I'm just going to play you a short, and also Brazil is one of the most mixed countries in the world as well, to be fair, and you'll see that through this next video clip that I'm going to show you.
Meu nome é Simone.
Meu nome é Regina.
Meu nome é Joacinei.
Race, color, identity in Brazil, it's complicated. Even within the same family, how you see yourself and how others see you are not always the same thing. Meet Simone's family. They live in a community on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro.
Meu nome é Rodrigo.
Eu sou Isabelle. Daniele.
Jéssica. Meu nome é Sara. E até 5 anos e minha idade é 5 anos.
Para mim só existe duas raças, branco ou negro, né? Branca, logicamente eu não sou, então sou negra.
Eu sou branca.
Eu sou preta. Eu me acho preta, mas as pessoas me acham morena. A minha prima Jéssica é branca, o cabelo dela é liso.
Minha mãe é branca e meu pai era negro.
Meu pai é branco, a minha mãe é preta.
Minha raça é negra.
A minha cor mesmo é marrom bombom, mas como não tem isso, eu sou pardo, né?
Eu acho que o Ney é negro.
Pardo significa ser uma pessoa misturada.
A minha filha é branca, embora ela é misturada. Eu sou negra e o pai dela é branco.
A minha cor é marrom.
Ela é branca pela cor da pele que ela tem.
Por que a sua cor é marrom?
Não sei.
Eu acho que a raça muda a minha vida Acho que desde o início, né? Sou ciente da história toda que eu carrego quando me identifico como negro. O peso que isso tem.
Minha cor nunca influenciou e nem influencia em nada.
Se você tem um aspecto de branco, né, acho que as portas se abrem muito mais facilmente.
A parte ruim de ser negra é porque você é classificado pela sua cor, não pelo que você é.
Quando você vai se candidatar a uma vaga de emprego, muitas das vezes você tem as mesmas qualificações ou até maiores do que aquela pessoa branca, e as pessoas preferem, né, escolher aquela pessoa branca.
Eu e Simone, minha esposa, nós temos pais preto e branco. Mas só que ela tem características maiores da parte preta do que eu. Então, eu transito mais fácil no meio do povo do que ela.
Pelo fato de eu ser negra e as minhas irmãs serem brancas, às vezes quando tinha aquelas brigas, né, às vezes elas me chamavam de neguinha, macaca, e aquela coisa da briga ali em si, né, mas na hora eu me sentia mal, mas depois passava.
Que eu me lembro, eu nunca chamei ela de neguinha nem de macaca. Se eu pudesse, eu não mudaria minha cor.
Não, eu não mudaria minha cor.
Ah, minha cor é linda, né? Ser negro é lindo.
Meu nome é Simone.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Okay.
Hi, we're here.
Yeah. Any feedback on that there? Any comments on there?
It's very interesting. It's all of them, they look like each other.
They look like what, sorry?
They look like each other.
Yeah, Tiago?
No,
Each
they look
other, I
like
think she
each
means.
other.
Oh, they look like each other. They look like each other.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think they were talking about they were from the same family, but as I said to you, Brazil is a heavily mixed country, and yeah, there's a lot of that you find a lot of that, and there's a lot of classifications of what people are supposed to they claim themselves to be, but as you can see.
Sorry, about color. I'm just saying that the color is cultural.
Mm.
When you call the color is really cultural. It depends on the culture. For example, in Sudan we say green. No one is green, but it is green. If you are a Sudanese originally, then you are green. We don't say brown. We don't never at my time never say black because black was a cussing word. So it is cultural. Mainly it comes from the culture, but we are adapting the culture of the European. This is why we go into black and white.
Yeah.
But in our countries, we didn't.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
I think you cut off there. We didn't quite hear you at the end.
I said it is cultural. Do you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the color is cultural. When you say the color, for example, in Sudan we say green. For original Sudanese, we call the color is green. There is no green color, but for us as a culture is green. At my time, if you say black, this is a cuss. We don't say, we don't use it. So it is cultural, but we are adapting the culture. When we came here, then we take black or white because we are adapting the culture of this country. So this is why we are going to black and white.
It's not just this country. It's also the Western terms. The term, because the dividing people into these kind of terminologies is actually a Western concept. It doesn't, because as I said to you, my father himself, he didn't identify himself as black, but then he was told that he was black when he came here. So people then, as you said, they've adapted to that. But it's interesting that you should say that though, because the name Sudan itself means black. The name Sud, the root word of it is actually Sud, which was actually named by other people before that. And prior to that, the Egyptian kingdom, which was populated by Sudanese actually, was called Kemet. And Kemet means black, and the people called themselves Kemetu, which means the black people. So some of these words are are self-named by the people themselves, but they're also named by others. Like the word Ethiopia has a Greek origin, and it literally means, Ethiops means the people that have got burnt faces. The word Niger means black also, which is where you get the word Nigeria and the word Niger from, and the insulting word nigger, which we're gonna come on to later. But you're absolutely correct. It's all down to culture and context of how the word is used, because it could mean something positive in one country and one culture, and it could mean something negative somewhere else. But I think that we need to, although we're adapting to the Western model of classification, I also think that we also need to be careful that we don't fall into traps as well. Allow people to tell us how to identify ourselves, because we need to know how to identify ourselves as well as go by other people's definitions, but not use other people's definitions as the sole reason for identifying themselves. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's nobody black anyway. I've already shown you on the montage of faces of people that are all brown skin. None of them are black. Speaking of which,
but actually we have in Sudan various names calling the black. For example, we have people they call Azraq. They refer to the color, because there is the color of people like is very dark. They call them Azraq. And also they call them lemon, like a green, like, and they call this different type of lime, they call them. So we have so many different names they call them, but this also name when they call it is referring to the black, you know. Some of them is insulting, like Abid, that is referring to them as like that by with the ethnic minority in the Sudan themselves. They have this. And having said so, in 1970s, they have been banned by the Nimeri government to call anyone Abid or any other name, and they have to face 6 months in jail. That is an established fact.
Okay. Yeah.
Even in my country, they have different names. For the people who have black skin, they told them like Arabian, because in my country there is another language. So the people from Sahara, they told them Arabian. And when we go to the Sahara, the people who have very dark skin, they said this is slave, Abid. And we are the people who have light skin, they said like queen. My grandma, she is from Sahara, she have dark skin. They told her, in my country, they call her Arabian girl, even they don't say her name.
Where is your country, sorry?
Algeria.
Algeria. أهلا وسهلا.
Yeah.
أهلا بكم.
أهلا بك. شكرا.
شكرا.
Yeah, and because it's interesting, because in Algeria, in the south of Algeria, the people in the south of Algeria they're actually dark. They're quite dark actually.
Mixed.
And they're different from the people that reside in the north. But again, this idea of associating.
I'm from East Algeria. We speak a different language than Arabic. So the people from Sahara, we say to them like they are Arabian. We don't talk about the skin. We talk about language. But when you go to the Sahara, they put themselves like two groups, like queens and group slaves. Like who have little bit light skin, they said is like the queens, and the others is slaves, and they call each other like this, like is culture like this. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that is because it has been brought by the people who are invaded to the original of the people in land, like the Tawarik, Belisario, and the other groups. They call them barbaric. So those are the main inhabitants. That is where the problem occurred with the other people who come in and bring the language, and they think they are the superior race.
A lot of things happen, and a lot of attitudes changed because when you're looking at history, history goes through periods of time where things change. So there came a time when this darkness was associated with slavery, whereas if you go back in time, it wasn't. Because if you go back further in time, a lot of the slavery, particularly the slavery that was taking place in North Africa, it was actually white people that was actually being enslaved, Southern Europeans. They were the main source of slaves for that took place, particularly what happened in Spain, what they call Andalusia, and in North Africa. There's books that you can, reference books that you can get where it talks about that slave trade, which is not often known or spoken about by people, where Europeans were actually, and they were white Europeans, and they were, if you saw a white European, that was synonymous with the slave status. But again, that changed after Christopher Columbus and the 15th century and him going to America, or claiming that he went to America, and then the world all of a sudden shifted. So after the fall of Andalusia in Spain, the world shifted from one degree to another, and the classification of people into certain groups as slaves, as rulers and kings, then started. Let's talk about the word Africa and African. So the origin of the word Africa is from the Romans. It's not an African word. The word Africa doesn't come out of any African language. It comes out of Latin, and originally what was called Africa was in North Africa, in the area known as Tunisia, only that area, and it was called Ifriqiya, and it was named after a man, and the man's name was Major General Scipio Africanos. I've just put his picture there, and then later on, so it was only applied to that area, Tunisia. It wasn't applied to the whole continent as well. But later on, when other colonizers came, they then took the name and applied it to the whole continent. But the point I'm trying to make is even this terminology, African, is new. It's not something that has come out of the people on the continent themselves. It was imposed on them. Nobody in Africa can tell you what the word African means because it doesn't come out of any of the languages that are there. Somebody told them, we're going to give you this identity of African. So it was later extended to define the whole continent, and all the people residing there became known as Africans. But if you go back in time and you look at old maps of the continent that they call Africa, you won't see the word Africa written in there. You'll see all different countries. It's kind of echoing at the moment. You'll see various terminologies used, but there wasn't a name to describe the whole continent, and the people didn't. There's millions of tribes on the continent of Africa, as you know, and so they didn't have a name that was describing all of them. They only described the geographical location of their tribes and where they live. They did not have a name that described the whole continent. That just needs to be made clear, actually. So you go out of Africa as well, where people, anthropologists, when they're studying the origins of humankind, they do actually go to Africa, and it's now like a fact that the majority of anthropologists agree that human life actually started in Africa, particularly in East Africa, and that's where you find the oldest human fossil remains. They don't actually go anywhere else. They don't actually go to any part of the world. That's where the main concentration is. So in that sense, everybody's African. And if we're all saying that we're all human beings, that we're all Beni Adam and we're all related, then everybody's African. And if you believe in the African terminology. Arab is another one. Without going too deep into this, I don't want to start everybody debating over this issue. But again, Arab is not a specific race of people either. It's various types of people that share a language and share similar aspects of similar cultures. Doesn't mean that they're exactly the same, but similar. But they can relate to each other in other ways. That's about as basic a definition as you can get for me as Arab, and it includes many people of many skin tones, especially these days. Yeah. Sudanese. The name Sudan has its roots in the Arabic word Sud, And it's an objective, and it's describing the physical appearance of groups of people who live in a certain geographical location in a continent now known as Africa. So if you look at the map there below, and you see where it's got this beige color, and then beneath that you've got a slightly darker brown color. This region here, all of this region here used to be called the Sudan. So you're talking about from Gambia, Senegal, all the way across Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, until you get to the extremities of the continent, which is Sudan and Ethiopia. The whole of this region here was called the Sudan, and all of these people were called Sudanese, all of them. It was only the colonizers, particularly the French, came into the continent that they started to make borders and make divisions and give these areas names such as Burkina Faso and Mali and Senegal and things like that. But apart from that, these people were known as Sudanese before. So the people in the west of Africa were known as Western Sudanese. The ones in the central were known as Central Sudanese, and the ones on the eastern coast were known as Eastern Sudanese. When the colonizers colonized, they divided up these lands and they renamed them. Because Sudan was actually colonized by Britain and Egypt, they decided to keep the original name Sudan, and now it is still kept the name the Republic of the Sudan.
Egyptian never colonized Sudan, never.
That's true, yeah.
Never.
Yeah, they were, when I say colonize it, I said by proxy. So they were a proxy. Proxy means that you're not actually doing something, you're doing something on somebody else's behalf.
I agree with you, because that is the way they have invaded my sultanate, my kingdom in Darfur in 1916. I agree with you, with the British.
Okay. So, right, so we got West Indian or Caribbean. Right, you've got people here, obviously, who live in this country, and they're one of the first, not the first, but one of the first groups of Black people to come and live in this country, and they're referred to as West Indian or Caribbean. The word West Indian, obviously, it's not describing the people because they're not Indians. But Christopher Columbus, he sailed to the area in the south of America, and he reached some islands, and he thought he was in India. And the reason why he thought he was in India, because the people that he met there on the islands they look like that. If you see the picture that I've shown you, so he said they're Indians, and he described them as West Indians, or Caribbean, because the Carib was the name of one of their tribes. So these are the original people that used to live in Jamaica, Barbados, Cuba, Trinidad, and all these islands, and a massive genocide against them was committed by Columbus and the Portuguese, so much so that these people no longer exist on the planet Earth. They've totally gone. They no longer exist. Every single one of them was killed off on the islands. Very few that remained went to Latin America, to Colombia, and even there they were massacred there. There's very few of them left. So the original people of the Caribbean were in fact these tribes, and there's a picture of some of them there, but these are not actually from the Caribbean, they're actually from Colombia, but they're related to the ones in the Caribbean. So those are the original people of the Caribbean. So when the pirates went to West Africa and started to take people from West Africa and took them to the islands, they refer to them as West Indian or Caribbean people. And that was through the slave trade, which started in the 16th century. And then you had the second wave of Caribbean people coming into this country, which I'm sure you've heard on the media about, the Windrush, where after the Second World War, after the Second World War, and this is something again that is not a lot of people don't know about these things. Yeah, the Caribbean people did not migrate to this country like just because they're looking for work. No, the British government went with someone whose name was Enoch Powell. He went to the Caribbean islands and he invited them to come and work here. they were quite happy to live in Jamaica and stay in their islands, but he went down there and he promised to give them work. Why? Because Britain had suffered a lot after the Second World War. And the fact is, a lot of the English people over here did not want to work. They were quite lazy. So they went to get people from the colonies, and the Caribbean islands, as particularly Jamaica, was one of their colonies. So they wanted to get them over here to work, and to work on the railways, to work in the schools, and to work as part of the NHS. So they were, in fact, invited over. And the person who was responsible for inviting them over was somebody called Enoch Powell. And it's just ironic that he went to Jamaica to recruit work here, and only for him to, like 5 years later, to be quite a racist person and ask for them to leave. That's the irony of that. So I think I'm only assuming that most of the people on here are of African origin who are actually listening into this meeting. I think it's important that you understand about the history of the Caribbean people as well, especially in this country, because if it wasn't for them, right, we as people from African origin, we would not be walking up and down the street so freely. They suffered and broke down a lot of barriers during that period of time between the 1940s up until the 1970s. They broke down a lot of barriers, and they kind of paved the way to make it easier for us to come and live in this country. They suffered a lot of racism, loads of beatings, and even deaths. Some of them were even killed during that period of time. And they were the ones who actually forced the Race Relations Act to come out in 1965. There wasn't a Race Relations Act prior to that, but there had to be one because the level of discrimination that was being enacted against them. So they actually paved the way, and they made it a lot easier for other migrants who came in the 70s and in the 80s to come and live in this country and not suffer the kind of oppression that they went through during that period of time. That was the first generation of the Caribbean people that came here. And that's what Windrush is about now, if you follow in the news, because to show you how ungrateful the British government have been, they're deporting these people back, people that have been living here for 40, 50 years, and telling them, well, because you came here at that time without the right document, we have to send you back to your home, even though you've not been here for 40 or 50 years.
But the problem is with their own MPs who are seated on the parliament, was supposed to represent them, that Enoch Powell, he was during the Shelter government, he was a minister, and he invited them to United Kingdom, and they were a British subject. They were holding British passport during that time. And when they come here, they've been invited, but they don't need to have a British citizen because they're already under British colonization and they were citizens. So their MPs in the United Kingdom here, the first to be elected, they did not address the issue. And they sit down in the parliament and assigning with a whipper to pass legislation against their own people. Here's the problem.
Yeah, and what they did is they actually changed the immigration status. So it's true, if you're from not just the Caribbean, but if you were from the Commonwealth, you could actually come to live in England. You didn't need a passport. So they actually changed all those rules right in the middle of people coming over here, because they saw that more and more people were coming. And so they decided, well, we're not going to have that anymore. So they outlawed that act as well. And then they were telling people, now you have to make an application to become a British citizen. There's a good documentary, which at the end, I'll show you at the end. I've got it written in my notes somewhere here, and I think it's worth you looking at that to see exactly how that happened and how they just, they completely changed things around from inviting people over.
It is not only for them. They could be coming for us next round as well if you are not be careful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could talk about today, even in terms of who is British and who is not. But I just don't have the time, especially in regards to citizenship as well, because a lot of people here, and I don't want to sort of divert from the subject at the moment, even though we are talking about the same subject, because it is related to racism. But there's a lot of people here who are being deported even as we speak. So if you're, I'm just telling you now, if you're a parent and you came from Sudan and you have children over here, or if your children were not born here, let's say they were born in Sudan and they came here when they were young, if they came in when they were 3, 4, even 5 years old, if they get involved in crime in their teenagers years, 18, 19, 20, it's quite possible they can be deported back to Sudan and they're British citizens. It's not even quite possible. I'm telling you that it's happening.
It is not possible. It is happening. It happened, and I is this.
I've just said it. I've just said that. I said that that's what they're doing because in my line of work, I'm seeing that is happening. Not just Sudanese. They're doing it to Arabs. They're doing it to all kinds of people. They even done it to that girl who went to join ISIS the other day. Although that's a different kind of thing. But there are people here that have committed crimes at the age of 19, and while they're serving their sentence in the prison, the Home Office looks at their immigration status and sees that this person was born in Khartoum in so and so and so and so time. And they go, oh, and he's committed a crime. That means we can revoke his nationality. So even having a British passport, it doesn't count for anything. They can still revoke that and tell you that you're not really a British national, or you've revoked your right to having it by committing a crime, so we're deporting you back. That is real, and that is happening as we speak. So I'll have to do another
session.
I'll have to do another session on that and bring my evidence as well from the Home Office and facts. And there are groups that are groups of lawyers that are kind of trying to dispute that and trying to get the government to kind of see to change their ways. But I think with Brexit and all this things happening at the moment, especially with the guy that we've got sitting down in 10 Downing Street, I think for them it's just going to be full steam ahead. So just be wary of that you can be deported from this country even if you've been living here for 100 years. If you commit a crime and they look into your immigration status, they can just say that by you committing the crime, you've forfeited your nationality here and we can deport you back. And
yes,
they've done that. They've done
yes,
that.
You are right. Because this law, it is now it's 10 years since they have done it. 10 years since they passed this law.
Yeah. Now they're doing now to young. They did it recently to somebody who was from Angola, and he was 19 and he left Angola when he was 3. And they tried to plead on his behalf to say that he doesn't know Angola. He left there when he was 3. He doesn't even speak the language, and they still deported him anyway. So prejudice, an attitude based on limited information, and it often relies on stereotypes as well. And the root of that word prejudice is prejudging. So the word pre means before, and judice means judicial, which means law. So that means you're making some kind of judgment about someone before you actually know about them. And normally prejudice is usually, but not always, negative. But you have positive and negative prejudice alike, especially when directed towards oppressed people. But they can be damaging because they do. Somebody needs to mute themselves. Hello. Hello. Okay, so mute.
I tried to mute her, but I can't find difficult to do that.
Is it you?
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Sorry. No. I tried to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've done it now.
Yeah. So prejudice is linked to stereotypes, and that's when
Mohammed, I think it might be best if you mute all, and then we allow Abdelkarim to emphasize his presentation, and then maybe for the participants, maybe they can make notes, and then he will allow us to debate after. Otherwise, if we keep interrupting him, we won't be fair to the people who wants to participate as well. Thank you.
Okay, Abdelkarim, I'm going to mute all, and you can open your one, okay? I'm muted after that. Okay?
Yeah,
Listen to me now.
Yeah.
Okay. Mute all.
I think, can I start speaking now? Or?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So prejudice is linked to stereotypes and prejudging people, and all of us are guilty of doing that at some point in our lives. It is not something that we're all immune to, because sometimes, a lot of the times, we've been socialized into that way of thinking. I'll give you a couple of examples down at the bottom. So people say that women are emotional. Others will say Asians love money, or most Jamaicans are drug dealers. Does this mean that all stereotypes are false? No. I mean, there is some truth in what people are saying, but I think a stereotype is when you exaggerate a truth and you paint that truth on everybody, rather than looking at taking people on merit as an individual. So it's not that it's not true, because there are truths in it, and you can see traits of certain behavior and characteristics in some people, but it's wrong for you to actually characterize everybody from that same group as being like that. That's quite damaging. So that is a form of racism as well. Tribalism. Tribalism is similar to racism, but there's slight differences, and in the sense that tribalism is normally and most often local. So tribalism exists where there's ethnic groups that tend to live in the same area or geographical location, and there is discrimination or ethnic pride on either side. Yeah. However, this word is also used to describe situations where people are overly loyal to their own group. For example, Nigeria is a nationality as well as a nation, but it has more than 200 ethnic groups. So if you're not careful and you overemphasize your tribal pride or your ethnic pride, this can lead to bigotry and racism. And at its most extreme, it could lead to war and genocide. However, in the Quran, Allah says that He did make us into tribes and families. So it's not something that is forbidden, because it's actually there. It's something that, you know, it's something that was there. It's naturally created by Allah Himself. He's going to create us into these tribes and into these families. So that's part of the diversity of creation as well at the same time. But also, He also says the best of you is those who have taqwa, right? So He's, on the one hand, He's talking about He's created us into tribes and families, but at the same time, He's saying that individually or as a group, the best of you is those who have taqwa. And if you know anything about the Quran, the way the Quran works, the way the ayats work, when Allah is mentioning something, when He wants to emphasize something, He always puts it towards the end of the sentence. So He will mention the tribes and the families first, but towards the end, He will tell you, but the best of you is the ones who have the taqwa, which then eliminates that feeling of your tribe. So it's not wrong to say that you're proud of who you are or where you come from, but there should be limitations on it as well, as long as you don't allow it to spill over into aggression or into oppression or into feelings that you feel that you're better than somebody else. That's where it becomes an issue. So if we're looking at countries that have had these kind of problems, like Sudan itself, where ethnicity has been an issue and still continues to be an issue, and then it got to the point where people decided that they wanted to separate. But what's interesting about that is that the separation was based on geographical location. To some extent, it wasn't based on ethnicity. And the reason why I say that is because less than 2 years after South Sudan split from the north, they had problems amongst themselves within their own tribal groups. So therefore, the initial separation brought them together as one, because they then thought, well, we have a common enemy, if you want to call it that. But then when the common enemy was moved out of the way, then they started on each other. So this problem of tribalism and ethnicity, identity, and different is deep, and it has levels to it as well, various levels. It's not as straightforward as how people make it out to be. Not only that, we know that John Garang, he never actually advocated for Sudan to separate. It was people that came after him, and they were influenced by people who, outsiders, who wanted to exploit the situation in Sudan and divide the country into two for their own benefit. And neither side has benefited from the separation. Somalia is kind of interesting as well in terms of Africa, tribalism, because Somalia is the only country in Africa where everybody speaks the same language. They only have one language there. Everybody is of the same religion, and the culture is the same. So I'm wondering can you hear me, Mohammed? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. But that's what happens when you mute everybody. You think you're talking to yourself. So Somalia is kind of unique in Africa in the sense that despite those unifying factors, the language, the religion, and the culture, because the culture in Somalia is all the same, they still managed, despite all of those strong unifying factors, to split themselves into two warring factions, as a matter of fact, and start to slaughter each other and kill each other, which I found kind of like, wow, if you can't get together based on those factors, then what can bring you together? So this issue of identity, difference, and tribalism is quite deep. We had the Salamat festival last year in RBKC, and it featured, in terms of Africa, it mainly featured the Horn of Africa countries. And I invited the Somali community to attend, because they needed to attend anyway, because they have a large community in RBKC, and they're from the Horn of Africa anyway. But there was infighting amongst themselves. One group complained to me, why did I invite the people from Somaliland, and why didn't I invite the people from Somaliland? To me, as far as I'm concerned, I was just inviting Somalis to participate in the festival. I didn't really care where you're from, but the infighting amongst them caused one group not to attend, and even get to the point where they sent text messages and went on Facebook and told the people on whatever side of the divide that they're on not to attend the festival, which I find that kind of shameful, to be honest with you, given the fact that we're trying to promote our culture and we're trying to show the better side of ethnic diversity and African culture in the UK, given that there's such a climate of racism with Brexit and Islamophobia against Muslims, and yet we ourselves still finding these divisions and reasons to separate and to divide, even when it comes to providing entertainment resources for the general public. So this issue of tribalism, I think it has to be dealt with the youths, the younger generation, because I find the younger generation tend not to be like the parents, unless the parents brainwash their kids to following them. So if we're going to start and address these issues, we need to start with the kids first, because I think a lot of the elders, they're too far gone, and they're too steeped, and they're too set in their own ways for them to actually turn around. Sorry. Rwanda, Again, if you're talking about tragedy, then that was a serious tragedy that took place there. The number of deaths there was absolutely ridiculous. And it was all based on tribe. The good thing about that, the good thing that's come out of that is now Rwanda is one of the most progressive countries in Africa in terms of development and its economy. And I think the genocide that took place there has got the people to actually think deep about themselves, that what was this really all about and why did we do it? And I think sometimes it does take something as drastic as that to get people to kind of rewind and press the stop button and say, you know what, we need to restart, because the way that we were going was totally wrong, and it didn't benefit us at all. So well done to Rwanda, even though they've had that terrible legacy behind. Racism, can't do justice to racism because it's such a complicated subject. It will take me weeks, months to kind of go through the layers of racism. But what I've done here is a few very basic definitions. The first thing is that racism is prejudice and social institutional power, a system of advantage based on race. And the concept of race actually was something that was created again by Europeans by dividing human beings into races. And they said that there's 3 races or 3 major races. They said there's Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid, which is European, African, and Chinese. And they said everybody else is either a mixture or a combination of those 2. And then they divided those even then they divided those categories. They had subcategories within those groups. But what they did is they actually put white and European on the top. And then they said that we are the master race and we are the ones that are going to be ruling everybody else. This wasn't the case in the ancient world. This actually started around the 15th century after the fall of Andalusia. And then things started to change. And then it became much more global. Whereas before, there was issues with people before, but it was more localized. But in terms of globalized racism, then that started in the 15th century. And it was Europeans deciding that they're going to join together and call themselves white people, and then go into other parts of the world and subjugate anybody else who was non-white and impose their system of governance on them. And if there was any resistance towards them, then they would automatically be killed. So racism is different from racial prejudice, hatred, or discrimination. It's slightly different because racism involves power, real power, military power, political power, all kinds of power, institutional racism. So it's not as simple as just calling somebody your name or discriminating against someone because of how they look. No, it involves a whole system that will keep you subjugated for as long as these people are claiming themselves to be on the top. So racism involves one group having the power to carry out systemic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society, and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. I think we all know about Adolf Hitler and what he advocated during the 1930s. Although he attacked, one of the reasons why he attacked and killed so many Jewish people wasn't because of their religion, but he actually thought that Jewish people was some kind of subhuman. That's how he described them in his writing. And as soon as you get people describing other people as less than human, that just gives them a license to do whatever they like with them. Because if you're not considering somebody else as a human being, then you won't have any compassion for them, and you can do them as you like. This is Charles Darwin here. Probably heard of Charles Darwin. He's the father of evolutionary theories. And he was also quite racist. He wasn't quite racist, he was a racist, because Darwinism is based on evolution and one species evolving into another species. But the way how he understood it was that human beings were a species, but the white species or the white race of people or the European people were at the top, and everybody else was some kind of subhuman beneath them, or not quite human, or not quite as human as white people. So that's Charles Darwin, and his theories are still taught in universities and in schools, despite the fact that a lot of people have actually come and trashed what he said academically as well. 1970s and 1980s Britain, this is where I grew up, and it was quite different to what we're experiencing today. Britain now, or what should I say, the cities of London and the Birmingham and Manchester are quite multicultural, and there's a lot more representation of ethnic minorities in the UK these days. It's not the best, but it's a whole lot more than when I was growing up, because when I was growing up, there was absolutely none. You just didn't see any black people on the TV, you didn't see anybody. And people's racism was a lot more overt, then they could actually come out and say whatever they liked. And there's, if you see here on the bottom left-hand side, there's where I'm putting the cursor. This was a program, it was called Love Thy Neighbor. And it was like a comedy. And there was this white family living next to this black family. And the white family used to racially insult the black family all the time. And people thought that was entertainment, and they thought it was funny, you know. And to be honest with you, I thought it was funny growing up. Because, you know, you just think, this is silly and it's something to laugh at. But because I was young, I didn't fully understand the implications behind what was going on there, because they were actually dehumanizing you and mocking you in front of everybody on the TV. So this is Enoch Powell, the same Enoch Powell who went to the Caribbean and recruited the Caribbean people to come here and to work, and then only for him later on to then start advocating for them to leave and start using openly racist language, even saying things like they're going to, if we allow these Caribbean people to stay, they're going to breed like rabbits, which was one of the ways that he described them if they were going to have children. From a religious point of view, there's many imams and many scholars who said that racism, the origin of racism actually started with Iblis, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to bow down to Adam, and he refused. And he refused on the basis that he felt that he was better than him, and he was actually created before him. And so there's many like tafsir to say that this is the origins of how racism started. In other words, Satan's arrogance and his sense of superiority over Adam is the genesis of an individual's thoughts of being better or superior to his or her fellow human beings. Institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education, amongst other issues. This country has institutional racism. They've actually admitted it themselves. It's a lot for me to go through, but I think the most obvious one would be the police. The police for a long time have operated on the basis of racial discrimination, both from a perpetrator and from a victim's point of view. So if I give you an example of, I don't know if you remember, if some of you were here, in 1993, a young Caribbean boy named Stephen Lawrence, he was murdered. He was a victim of a racist murder by 4 white men who stabbed him to death in Eltham in southeast London. And the day after he was killed, somebody went to the police and they gave them the names of the people that were responsible for doing that. This was the day after Stephen Lawrence was killed. And then in 1996, a head teacher in a school in North London, St. George's, I do believe it was, he was stabbed. The head teacher was white. He was stabbed by one of the pupils in the school. And the person who did the stabbing, he was arrested within 2 days. 2 days they arrested him. Stephen Lawrence, the murderers of Stephen Lawrence weren't arrested until 19 years after he was stabbed and killed. 19 years. The police couldn't be bothered to do a full investigation. They were given names of potential perpetrators. They didn't follow it up. It took 19 years before they arrested 2, because there was 5 of them. They've arrested 2 and found them guilty, but the other 3 are still outside walking the streets freely. It was so bad at the time, and there had to be like a government report review, and it was found that the police were institutionally racist. They couldn't be bothered because the victim was black. They didn't put all their efforts out to go and find who these perpetrators were. Now, I just want to clarify that I'm not saying, and I don't believe, and I'm not saying, definitely not saying that everybody in the police force or every single policeman is like that. That's just simply not true. Even if they are a small minority, but the small minority can have a significant impact. That's the problem. So I'm not saying that every policeman or all the police are racist, because you can't say that, because the police are very helpful, and they have been very helpful. And I work with the police myself. Part of my job is to work with the police. But they do have elements. They do have people in there that do think like that. You know, because at the end of the day, a policeman is just another human being. He's just another person who belongs in a society. He could have his own racist thoughts and have his own racist feelings. When he goes to job and when he goes to work and he puts on his uniform, he's just doing his job. But you can't take the racism out of his mentality. And sometimes, and a lot of the times, especially as we've seen in America, that racism and that feeling that they have does influence how they work, especially if they're working with communities that are non-white. You have white supremacy, again, which is another form of racism, but that's when white people as a whole, they go to an extreme, and they just believe that everybody else needs to be subordinate to them, and they were actually born to rule. I won't go into that because I'm very conscious of the time. Unconscious bias as well. Unconscious bias can be a difficult topic to explain and define. After all, if something is unconscious, how do you know that it even exists? Now, unconscious bias, everybody, myself and anybody who's listening to this presentation, we all suffer from unconscious bias. It's something that you're socialized into and you don't realize that you're doing it at the time. Unconscious bias occurs when people favor others who look like them or share their values. For example, a person may be drawn to someone with a similar educational background from the same area, who is the same color, gender, or ethnicity as them. Now, people do that naturally, and they don't think there's anything wrong with it because it's something that you're actually used to. Your parents behave like that, your family behaved like that, the people in your community behave like that. So you didn't have a problem doing that yourself. It's only when people start to talk to you about it that you then start to become aware. And we have sort of unconscious biases, which is also called microaggressions. And that is when somebody's saying something to you, they might be saying it, or they think they're saying it in an innocent way, but underneath that is where the unconscious bias lies. So if somebody says something to you like, you speak English very well, or they'll say something like, you're really pretty for someone who's dark. Even other stuff like, your name is too hard to pronounce. Can I call you Mary? So we get a lot of that especially in Westminster with social workers. They tend to just chop people's names up, especially Arabic names. They call instead of calling somebody Muhammad, they just call him Mo. there's nothing wrong with calling somebody Mo, but I just think that they can at least make an effort to try and pronounce the person's name. And to me, that's a kind of unconscious bias, because what you're really saying is, I'm not interested in your culture that much. I want to have an engagement with you based on my terms and not on your terms. You really should make an effort to try and understand the language of the people that you're speaking to and try to pronounce their names, and not just say, can I call you something else instead? It's just not fair. You don't act like a normal black person. So what does a normal black person act like? You know, that's a loaded kind of statement, isn't it? Or even they say, why do you sound so white? So what does sounding white mean? If you're somebody who can articulate yourself and you're well spoken, does that mean you sound like a white person? Or does it mean that you know how to articulate yourself, you know how to speak very well? You do get these things. You're not like other Muslim people. I mean, what does that supposed to mean? What's other Muslim people like then? You know, are you categorizing everybody into one group? So Muslims have a particular behavior, and because you don't behave like that, they're saying that you're somehow different. Yeah. So with this unconscious bias as well, you know, there's a lot to be said in terms of what's going on now with this corona and with this Black Lives Matter. And recently, as you know, or you might not know, but there was French doctors who went on the TV in France, and they were talking about a vaccine, a possible vaccine being used to fight corona. But the French doctor said that we need to go to Africa and to go and trial it in Africa, which is really strange, because at the time that he said it, the coronavirus wasn't really in Africa. It was very, very few cases. But here, this French doctor was saying that we should go to Africa and we should use people there to trial the vaccine. Now to him, he might have been saying that in a sincere way, but that's showing his unconscious bias and also his racism. Because why would you then decide to trial something on people who don't have the corona? Because I'm saying at the time, African people didn't have corona like they do now. The people that really needed to be trialed on the vaccine was the people in France, because the numbers of people with COVID-19 in France and in Italy and in Spain were quite high. But he said we should go and trial this vaccine on African people, which means, because when you're doing a trial with the vaccine, you're not sure of what the results are going to be like. It could be disastrous. There could be side effects. Anything could happen. So you don't know. So what they've done essentially is said, well, let's go and try it on the Africans. And if it works on them, then it's okay. If it doesn't, well, then we'll try something else. So that again is another form of racism through unconscious bias. We have histories of vaccines where vaccine experiments on people, actually, especially in America, where they've trialed vaccines on Black Americans. I don't know if you've heard of the Tuskegee experiment, where they actually injected people with a vaccine to test it for syphilis, and it ended up with many people dying. This lasted for 40 years, and this was state-sponsored in America. So it wasn't some random private doctor doing it. This was actually coming from the American government himself. And Bill Clinton had to make a public apology in 1998 on behalf of the American government for what happened. I think something like 200 or 300 people actually were killed because of the side effects of this. South Africa, they had chemical and biological warfare programs, which they used on the Black South Africans, and they weren't prosecuted for that. And the reason why they weren't prosecuted for that is because when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and he was, they knew that he was going to be the future Prime Minister of South Africa, he had to sign a peace agreement between them where people from the previous regime would not be prosecuted for their crimes against the Black South Africans. That was part of the peace and agreement that was signed in order for Nelson Mandela to become the president. And one of the major crimes committed was the chemical and biological warfare program that they used against the Black South Africans, where they were injecting them with using vaccines to inject them with all kinds of diseases, which left women unable to have children. Some of them suffering from brain damage. And here you see down here at the bottom of the screen, on the right hand side, as recently as 2013, in Israel, the Ethiopian Jews were told when they arrived in Israel that they had to have vaccinations, and these vaccinations were for smallpox and cholera and things like that. And basically they were lying. That wasn't the case. These vaccinations were actually to prevent them from having children. If you just Google vaccinations against Ethiopian women in Israel, you'll see all these articles that came up on there, and it ended up with a lot of the women having side effects, suffering from cancer, kidney problems, and some of them even died. So African people, when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, they have suffered a lot and continue to suffer in more ways than one. And so it's no surprise to me that people are having issues with the vaccine, and what the Health Secretary Matt Hancock said recently about he would like to trial people in certain categories with this new vaccine that they want to test. And he just said, when he said Black and ethnic minority people, I'm sure you've seen the messages on WhatsApp circulating. People were quite shocked that he said that. And so now people are up in arms, and there's a lot of this. I think there is a petition going around to say that nobody should actually sign up to that because we don't trust them. Not only that, we have no idea. There's no guarantee that this vaccine is going to work. You know, it's still in the trial phase. So why would you volunteer yourself to go and take a vaccine, something like that? And in 5 years' time, you end up with kidney problems, you end up with cancer, you end up with brain damage, or you become infertile. And they go, oops, sorry, we didn't realize that these were the side effects. But hey, it's no problem because we only tested it on Black and ethnic minority people, so it's not a problem because they had it and we didn't get it. That's the underlying message that has been pushed by this. And I'm not saying that everybody in the NHS is a racist. I'm not saying that everybody in the NHS wants to kill people. I'm just saying that there are elements within those organizations that do think like that. And the NHS is full of people from BAME, Black and ethnic minority communities anyway. But they're the people that run it, the people that are in the higher positions, they're the ones who are dictating what happens to who, how, and when. And we just need to be mindful of that. I'm not against vaccines. Vaccines, they do work. Some of them, if they've been trialed and tested, but trials and testing of vaccine takes years. It can take up to 8 years before you actually see the results. We just had this coronavirus started recently. How all of a sudden you're going to come out with a vaccine in a couple of months? It's ridiculous. It really is. It's, you know, it's something that, you know, you really need to sort of like question people. And when they make these suggestions, make sure that you are, make sure that you have knowledge about vaccines as well. Make sure that you talk to your MP, hold meetings, go onto websites and get as much information as you can. Just don't believe the hype, you know, because people, just because they're making an announcement, you have to see beneath the headlines and find out exactly what is going on, and also to look at the history of vaccines as well, particularly when it comes to Black and ethnic minority people. There's vaccination experiments taking place in Africa right now as we speak. As I'm sitting here talking to you and you're listening, there's vaccination programs taking place because there are African governments, as you know, a lot of them are corrupt. They will just take money, and then somebody will come from France or whatever country and pay them and say, look, we want to test this vaccine, and they'll take them to some village and they'll just give them 200 people as samples. These things happen all the time, and they don't even make the headlines. They don't even make the headline news. We don't even know that they're happening. You have to go and dig deep into alternative news to find out exactly what is happening. Internalized racism Internalized racism is a form of internalized oppression defined by sociologist Karen D. Pike as the internalization of racial oppression by the racially subordinated in the study of the psychology of racism. That means victims, people who are victims of racism, they internalize that racism and they actually believe in the oppression that has been imposed upon them, and they start to behave and act in that way. And it becomes a kind of self-hate and self-perpetuated. So they believe that they actually are inferior, and they believe that other people who are oppressing them are supposed to be oppressing them, and they're supposed to be in that position of authority. It's really quite strange, but there's a lot of Black people, especially in Africa, who do believe in that. If you ask them, I've met many of them, and they will tell you that white people, you know, God has gifted them with intelligence and technology, and they're supposed to be on the top. They actually do believe in that. So bleaching is another form of internalized racism as well. When people start to use creams, I know there's debates on this. Lengths to change your physical appearance. There's reasons why you're doing that. You know, things just don't come out of a vacuum. They don't come out of the middle of nowhere. You're doing that for a specific reason, and you may not even understand the reasons why you're doing it. You know, because it's been superimposed and embedded in you from a very young age. It's gone into your subconscious mind. So you actually think that you're making decisions for yourself when you're not. Those decisions were influenced by other factors that were taking place in the society around you. So if you live in a society, for example, where the way how you look and you're not represented, as particularly in the mainstream media, you're not represented in the education, you're not seen, you're almost invisible, and then the people who are visible look a specific way, then you will have feelings that you want to aspire to be like them. That's just a natural process that happens because you will naturally see these people as the main people and see yourself as something different. And that's a consequence of colonialism, slavery, and other people coming into our countries and imposing their will upon us. It's interesting because in Sudan, and in other countries in the Middle East, the term they use for white people, they say it's Khawaja, right? But I ask people, what does the word Khawaja mean? And they just say, it just means a European person or somebody who's a foreigner. But I said, no, what does it actually mean? Because it's not an Arabic word. The word Khawaja itself is Persian. And it was adopted by the Turkish because they have a close historical relationship with the Persians. And they took on that terminology. And then when they were in Sudan, they got people to call them Khawaja. And the word Khawaja actually means a master or lord. If you call somebody Khawaja, what you're really saying is, this is my lord and he is my master. Go and look it up. Just look at the origins of the word Khawaja. So even within the language itself, somebody's actually conned you into thinking that you're giving him respect, but you're over-respecting him because you're calling him a master. You know. So this internalized racism, again, starts at a very young age. Some say even as young as the age of like 2 years old, a baby can pick up signs and can understand the differences in people because they can visualize it. They may not be able to assimilate the information as an adult, but they can visually see it, and they know that there's differences between people. And I'm going to show you this video, which is an example of how the internalized racism process starts at a very young age. Some of you might have seen it before. If you're seeing it for the first time, I'll be interested, Mohammed, if you can turn on the microphone after this video because I need to get some feedback on it. I'm almost finished the presentation anyway.
Okay. You think after this, yeah? Okay.
तेरे चेहरे को क्या हुआ? तुम्हें चाहिए 9x.
चेहरे पे रौनक लाइए सिर्फ 9 सेकंड में फॉरेन पासपोर्ट दैट्स राइट मैम
मजाक छोड़िए मैं तो हिंदुस्तानी हूँ
आज ही 9x अपनाइए.
See, that video was clearly, the message in that video was you couldn't get it more black and white than that, could you, really? What it's saying is, if you lighten yourself, lighten your skin, and change your physical, and try to look more European, the more successful you're going to be. That's an advert that was aired in India. They wouldn't dare do anything like that in this country. They just wouldn't, because it wouldn't be allowed to happen. But in India, it's perfectly normal to do that. And India is one of the #1 countries for bleaching. Not even because most people think it's mainly African people that bleach, but India is actually the #1 country for skin bleaching. There's another video I'm going to show you as well, again talking about the internalization of racism from a very young age, and you might find this a bit shocking, but it is the reality.
Quale bambola è bianca? Quale bambola è nera? Quale delle due è bella?
Questa.
Qual è quella bella? Qual è quella brutta? E qual è quella buona? Quale è cattiva? Quale è buona?
Lei.
Perché è buona?
Perché ha gli occhi celesti.
Quale è cattiva? Perché è cattiva?
Perché è tutto nero.
E qual è la bambola che ti somiglia di più?
Okay. So it'd be interesting to get feedback on those two points, particularly the second one, because that is that experiment was actually originally done back in the 1950s in America, and then since then, somebody saying something?
Okay,
Can I just
hands? I think it's better.
yeah,
Go ahead,
I can see some young people listening to the presentation. If we can maybe have their view, because I'm sure they might see it in a different way from adult. If we can just allow them and encourage them to say something. I see a few of them, please. Thank you.
Yeah. I hope they're not shy. You see, this is what you get with young people, yeah. When they're talking amongst themselves, they're very loud, full of talk, they're full of chat. When they want to talk to me, they're full of chat, even my own children. But when you get them into a conversation, all of a sudden there's silence. So anyway, you young people out there, let's, I don't know at what point you joined, but it'd be good for you to interject, even if just to make a comment about how you feel, what you've seen so far and what you understand. No?
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I've just been listening.
Okay, may I know your name, sir?
Faris.
Faris, okay, Faris. Yeah. I'm gonna, because I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just gonna quickly flip through things so I'll get through to the Black Lives Matter. But this image here is talking about slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. And I'll come back to you, Faris, but what you said about the word nigger as well.
Yeah.
So no living white person is, this is a good statement. No living white person is responsible for slavery today, which is true, because it happened 400 years ago, right? But all living white people reap its benefit, just like all living blacks wear its scars. It's a very, very important statement. Okay, so what's all this fuss over statues? Right? Okay, big fuss over statues, people tearing down statues at the moment. Yeah. Statues originated in ancient Egypt, and they were to honor great people, people that have done things great in the society. They're also works of art, right? And something that a monument that future generations could actually could look at. It was adopted by the Romans and then by the Greeks as well, and then the Europeans adopted statue making to honor people in their society. So I think you can guess where that is. Can anybody guess where that is? The last picture I just put up. Trafalgar Square. Hello?
Trafalgar Square, yeah.
Yeah, Trafalgar Square, yeah. But the problem is with statues is that it's who you're honoring and why. And so we have, if you're talking about the history of Britain at one time called itself Great Britain. But the reason why they called itself Great Britain is because they went around conquering other countries and subjugating other countries. And what they did is the people that were leading these armies, the people who were leading these armies went into other countries and committed genocide against other people. But when they came back to England, they gave them a medal and a badge, and they were treated as a hero, and they erected statues of them. That's probably 90% of the statues that you're seeing in this country. These people were involved in some kind of warfare. It's very rare you're going to get someone, they're going to put a statue of him because he did this for women's rights or he did this for education. They normally put statues up of war heroes or people that were part of the colonization period. And these people were absolute racists, 100%, including Winston Churchill. This is Gandhi as well. Did you know about Gandhi?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gandhi's, if you go and Google Gandhi and his racism, I mean, Gandhi's been touted around as someone who was into human rights and this, that, and the other. But again, yeah, he was for human rights, but for some human rights, but not every human. He definitely not for Africans, because he went to South Africa and he actually agreed with the system that was taking place there. Again, not a lot of people know that. The media and the way that history is controlled, it speaks of a certain narrative, but it doesn't give you the full picture. So really, should you have a statue up of someone who actually supported the apartheid regime? I think the answer to that is pretty obvious. This is Sir Oliver Cromwell. This is outside the Houses of Parliament. So Oliver Cromwell, okay, he wasn't racist against black people, but he was racist against the Irish people. He described the Irish people as subhuman, and he was responsible for over 1 million deaths in Ireland. I think if you know the history of this country, they've always had a struggle between the Irish and the British, and he was one of the leading men that went over there into battle and subjugated the Irish, and he said that they're less than human. That's how he described them, and yet they have a statue of him outside the Houses of Parliament. Should we go there and tear down the statue? No. I don't believe in tearing down statues. I think the statue should be taken down and put in a museum, and they should be there for reference purposes only. But we should not have them in central London where people can stand and pose and take pictures with them, because these people were genocide, they were murderers. Now, some people will say, but that was then, and the mentality then was different to now. But my answer to them was, well, if it's wrong now, it must have been wrong then. You can't tell me that it was right then because that's what people did. No, wrong has always been wrong. So we need to emphasize that even though there was a period of time where they did these things and they didn't see anything wrong with it, it was still wrong. Just because they didn't see anything wrong with it doesn't make it right at all. Does anybody know who this is? You should know who this is, Mohammed. Auntie Hasabsida, you should know who this is.
Who this is?
You watch too much football. No, this is Horatio Kitchener. Kitchener.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Kitchener.
In my background, I thought he is a fat man. He's well built, not that slim.
Yeah, no, that's him. And look at all the medals that he has on his chest. This guy is just a warmonger. He was leading the British Army into different parts of the world, starting wars and just massacring people, right? So if you know about the history of Sudan, after the Mahdiya insurrection and Gordon was killed, he returned to Sudan to avenge Gordon's death. Yeah, and in a famous battle of Umdurman, the Battle of Umdurman, he and his army killed 4,000 people in not even a day. They killed them in one morning. They killed in one morning. They killed 4,000 people in one morning. Can you imagine that? In one morning. By the end of the day, they killed 15,000 people in one day. That's them, their army leaving England to come to Sudan, to somebody else's country, to come and subjugate them because they were fighting for their freedom, and you decided you're going to kill them. This man has got statues all over England, all over. There's loads of them. There's about 10. That's one of them there. I don't know if him being a fat man. I've not seen him as a fat man, Mohammed, so I don't know. And I'm not saying to anybody, any young person watching, I'm not saying that you should go and pull his statue down. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you need to be aware of these people and what they were about. And what you should do is petition to have their statues removed. And you do that in an intellectual way, and you say, look, we don't want to destroy the statue, but we don't want this man to be honored neither, because what he did was wrong. It's as simple as that. I mean, can you imagine if it was can you imagine if it was the other way around? Can you imagine if an African leader killed 15,000 English people and we decided to put a statue of him in the middle of Westminster? That statue would be gone in 2 minutes. It got in 2 minutes, wouldn't it? You know, so these people are doing these things. But again, you know, the hero to them is an enemy to somebody else. And there's a lot of hypocrisy as well, because if you remember, in 2003, the statue of Saddam Hussein was torn down in Baghdad after the American forces defeated him and his army. Nobody said anything about his statue coming down. They didn't say anything. Remember, this was a very famous picture here. Nobody said anything about the statue coming down. They didn't condemn it. Why? Because Saddam was a barbarian. He was wicked. He was cruel. He committed genocide against his own people. All right, what's the difference between him and Kitchener then? What's the difference between him and Lord Nelson? What's the difference between him and Edward Colston? This person that you see on the left-hand side here, who had millions of slaves, who saw people as less than human, but you got a statue of him in the middle of the town centre. What's the difference? There needs to be a review, and a review is actually taking place at the moment of the statues in this country, and not only just the statues, but the way that history has been taught to people in this country, because they have been portrayed as heroes, and their heroism was based on other people's demise. They went into other countries and they just killed, they committed genocide against people in their own lands. That's why they're heroes, and that's wrong. You've got Nelson Mandela there, so I wouldn't go there. Police in this country, I grew up in this country as a teenager. The police used to stop and search us quite a few times. We got so used to it that it didn't actually mean anything to us anymore. And they were quite openly racist in those days. A lot has improved since then, but the origins of the police actually in America, the origins of the police is related to slavery, because there were many people that were enslaved, but they were rebelling. They were constantly rebelling all the time and fighting and killing even the people that owned the plantation and running off. And so they organized, in America, they organized groups of people and they called them slave catchers. And these people used to hunt the slaves down and bring them back dead or alive. It depended on whoever owned them, what did he want done with them. And that is how the police originated in America. You can actually go online and go and check that out for yourself. So the police have, and these police at the time, or these slave catchers, they were quite barbaric and very violent towards the slaves when they caught them. And that seems to have been a tradition that has passed from one generation to another. I mean, we're seeing here the picture of George Floyd, which I was kind of hesitant to show, but I'll show it anyway. But that to me is not a one-off incident. That has been happening almost every day for the past 400 years. There was a time when, there was a time, I think a few years ago, where there was videos coming out of police killing black people every day in America, and it was nothing. And every time they went to court, they were acquitted. No judge would convict them. It's very difficult when you talk about injustice. And here again, you see this, the image that you see down here in the bottom left-hand corner. That's an image of, that's actually somebody being lynched, where the slave catchers have caught someone who's run away, and then they've hung him from a tree and lynched him, and then taken a photograph with people standing around watching. Here's another one. This is a lynching that goes beyond into the 1920s and to the 1930s, where in the southern states of America, they had a sport and it was called Hunt the Nigger. And that means they would go and kidnap somebody, a black person, they'll keep him for a few days, and then they'll create posters saying that we're going to have a lynching party on such and such a date. Believe it or not, this is what they used to do. It was a sport to them. And they would create a poster and saying, everybody come Saturday, the 4th of July or whatever, and we're going to have a lynching party. And the person that they'll kidnapped, on that day, they'll bring him out, they'll string him up, hang him up against a tree and burn him alive. And there will be a crowd of 1,000, 2,000, even 3,000 or 4,000 people watching. And they used to take photographs, and this is an actual photograph that I'm showing you here. It's not fake. There's thousands of these photographs. They used to take photographs of these lynching parties that took place in America. And between, I think up until the last lynching in America, hold on a second, I've got this in my notes here. The last lynching that happened in America, these lynching parties, the first lynching started in 1882. The last one happened in 1968. So between 1882 and 1968, there were 4,743 of these lynching parties. 4,000, where they would just hunt someone down, kidnap them, hide them for a few days, advertise the fact that they're going to have a lynching party, string that person up to a tree, hang them, drop them down, and then burn them alive. And they'll do that in front of a crowd. These are actual photos. Here, what you're seeing here is a newspaper article, which, as you can see, goes back to, my eyesight's really bad, so I can't really see it, but it's actually before 1920. And they're saying that 15,000 people saw a Negro burn 15,000 people stood around and watched it. And this is an actual photo, again, of another lynching. And this is the one where the 15,000 people turned up to see somebody being burnt at the stake. So America, the police have a history, a long-going history of violence against Black and ethnic minority people. It's not something new. And a lot of these people that you see doing this stuff now, their grandfathers were part of these lynch mobs. And so the tradition has passed from one generation to the other. All these people did was join the police force, and where they could actually do it they thought they can get away with it and do it in a legal way. And they did, because a lot of them actually did get away with these crimes. In this country, there has been issues with the police. Obviously not on the same scale as what's happening in America, but there's been a number of people that have died in police custody, and not a single person has been prosecuted for that. This started in the 70s. It happened a lot with the Caribbean people, but I have noticed that it's now happening with a lot of people coming from Africa, particularly refugees as well, or when they're deporting people. When they're forcefully deporting people, they use excessive force, which ends up with the person either ended up in hospital or in some cases dying, and none of the police or those responsible for that have been brought to justice. So this country does have it, but obviously it's not on the same scale as it is in America. And again, I want to reiterate, I am not saying that the whole police is bad. That's just not what I'm saying at all. It's just not. I'm saying that there are bad apples amongst them, but those bad apples are significant and they're impacting on some people, even if it's only one person, it's bad enough. Yeah, but it's quite widespread. And this issue that we have with the young people, especially, and this is one of the reference book that I've got for the lynching that I'm talking about, especially with the young people now, which we need to do another session with them in terms of how to engage the police with stop and search and what are your rights over that, because I think that's very important, so we don't get into situations where things escalate. Because in my experience, a lot of the problems between the police and the youth can be avoided. It depends on how you engage with the police. Even if they come to you in a rough way, if you present yourself in a certain way, they will back off. But if you start shouting and remonstrating and making noise and doing it, they want you to do that, and then they'll just get into a situation where they're going to use force. So you have to speak to the police in a respectful kind of way. You should also know your rights. You should know that your right is to ask him, why is he searching you? What is his reason? He should give you his name and his number. All of these kind of things you should know. And you could actually refuse to be searched also at the same time, unless he's got you. He needs to provide evidence and grounds for him to search you, because you can actually say, no, well, I'll refuse to be searched. Then he'll have to arrest you. If he's got reasons to arrest you, then he can take you to the station. But you can actually refuse to be researched if he doesn't give you like a legitimate reason for doing that. But again, that's something that we'll cover in another session, hopefully. Black Lives Matter. I've got my opinion on this. All I'm going to say to the young people listening out there is I support the cause of Black Lives Matter. I definitely support the cause because it's part of the work that I do. It's part of the work that the Jalliة does. It's part of the work that Auntie Hasabsida does. Anybody who's doing work within the communities and trying to improve other people's lives, then you're part of the Black Lives Matter movement. That includes Sister Hajar, the Nubian community. Anybody who's doing anything with young people or community members, then you're doing something towards Black Lives Matter. If you're helping refugees, if you're helping people with mental health, you're doing that anyway. So it's not just about this organization that's come out of America. I've got my own suspicions about them, and I do believe that they've been hijacked and other people are steering it in a politicized kind of way. I do see the good that they're doing, but I would just say to you and advise you, it's not about the organization, it's about you as an individual and what you do after protesting, because protesting and going on marches are good, and it's good in raising awareness, but it's what you do after that and what you continue to do after that also. But now I've just seen this Black Lives Matter has become like a fashion. People wearing it on shirts, and you know, even football teams are wearing it on the back of their the teams are wearing it on the back of their shirts. And I just think, you know what I mean? What's going to happen in a couple of weeks? You're going to take off the shirt and go back to normal. It's not a hashtag. When you talk about Black Lives Matter, you're talking about real issues of racism and discrimination, systemic and historical. So, and you're talking about real oppression and people's feelings and emotions. It's not something that just comes and goes. It's not a fashion, it's real. So if you're real and you really do believe in that, then you will continue to work regardless of the demonstrations and the protests, and you don't have to belong to that particular organization, which I said, I've got my suspicions about them, who's funding them, and the direction that it's going in. And some people are just joining it because they're politicizing it, and they're taking it in a certain direction and in certain beliefs. And if you don't believe me, just go to their website, go to the Black Lives Matter website, and just look at their mission statement, and you see what I'm talking about. You can see what they're about. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't be part of the cause, because the cause is real to everybody. I'm just saying that the organization, they've got their own agenda. So parents, if there's parents here, there's a good PDF form. It's actually called A Parent's Guide to Black Lives Matter. If you Google that, you'll see it's really kind of good. There's lots of resources about racism and talking to children about racism, identity and difference. And I think it's good for parents, it's good for teachers, it's good for people that work in communities to kind of use that. There's activities that you can do in there as well. On the left-hand side, there's a good reading book, but this is for young, very young children under the age of 10. So it's a child-friendly picture book that reminds us to love ourselves for who we are and to be kind and to respect others. This is recommended reading. I'm an avid reader. I've been reading for the past I've been reading for quite a long time, and I've got like 300 books in my house, which has kind of created a problem between me and my wife, and she's kind of packed them away in the attic. But these are some of the kind of material that I've read over the past 25 years. It's quite varied, so it talks about all different kinds of things related to history and to personalities, and I would encourage anybody who hasn't seen it, the elder ones might have, if you've not seen the film Roots, which is here, which is about the transatlantic slave trade, and it's a story of someone called Kunta Kinte, and I would advise you to watch that because it gives you kind of an idea of what happened in America, the beginning of racism in America in particular, and why that country is still plagued by racism today. I would recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it for young children though, because there's scenes in there that are quite emotionally distressing, and then they wouldn't be appropriate for young people because you're seeing people getting lashed. There's lots of racial abuse. You just need to be very strong. I mean, I watched it when I was young, and it had a deep impact. When they showed it in this country years ago, our teacher in the school, he had to call an assembly and speak to everybody and get everybody to calm down because it was quite emotional. You hear about slavery and you read about it, but when you're actually seeing it, I mean, it's only actors, but when you're seeing it for yourself, it brings it kind of home to you even more. So I would encourage you, if you can, to watch Roots, or but better still, you can just read the book. I always find that reading is a lot more, you get more benefits from reading than you do from watching a film, because a film just gives you a summary of things that are happening, but the book can actually go into details. Here's another interesting book as well, A Collar in My Pocket, and the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes Experiment, exercise by Jane Elliott. You can just Google her or just go to YouTube, and she did an experiment about people with brown eyes and people with blue eyes, and she did it on Oprah Winfrey, and she got people with blue eyes to have brown eyes, and she got people with brown eyes to have blue eyes. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, but you can see the result, and she sent them out into the world, and you can see the difference, and how they were treated. YouTube, again, if you want to go get references for YouTube, there's lots of very beneficial videos you can watch. Using African History as a Tool for Change by Zainab Badawi, and the doll test, which I've shown you on here. And there it is, the racism discussion with Oprah and Jane Elliott, part 2, Islam on racism. You can go and Google that. There's a good, they've got like all these imams and sheikhs talking about what Islam's stance on racial equality, and quoting hadiths from the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and what he said, and how the Quran stance on racism. And just because Islam says there's no racism, it doesn't mean that Muslims can't be racist, because I'm sure you know that there does exist racism amongst Muslims. Not in Islam. Muslims practice racism, but the religion doesn't. Another good film to watch is this one. It's called Rabbit Proof Fence, if you've got Netflix, and that talks about the plight of what happened in Australia, and it's about 3 girls in Australia. Australia, a lot of people don't realize that Australia had a system, a racist system, which was very similar, if not the same, as South Africa, against the Aborigine population there. And it only ended in 1972. And they used to take children away from their parents. They used to go and kidnap the children and take them away from their parents and put them in missionary churches, change their Aboriginal names, and get them to follow the Christian religion. It's quite a sad film. So if you're quite an emotive person, I just better warn you, because it's quite sad. But I think it's good viewing. Again, I wouldn't advise anybody to watch that under the age of 12. And then last, you've got Malcolm X letter from Hajj. I think you should all know who Malcolm X was, and the journey that he went on in his life. He experienced a lot of racism as a youth. His father was killed by a racist. He then ended up going to prison because he was on the streets selling drugs and in a gang. And then he came out of prison and he joined an organization known as the Nation of Islam, which, although they claimed to be Muslims, they had their own kind of reverse racist beliefs actually against white people. And he was in that for some years until he left that organization, and then he went to Mecca. And then he was introduced to true Islam, and he understood, because he was quite an angry person living in America, and what he'd experienced and what he was experiencing even at the time when he was at Hajj. But when he went to Mecca and he did Hajj, and he met a lot of sheikhs. His sheikh actually was a Sudanese. Actually, he was a Sudanese sheikh, Sheikh Hassan, who actually arranged for him to go to Mecca and perform the Hajj. And so he understood the religion, that the religion supersedes any racism and any feelings of inferiority and superiority. It doesn't mean that when he returned from America, all of a sudden he completely changed and, you know, he wasn't the same, but he was, because he came back to the same racist society that he left. But now he just had a much more deeper and spiritual understanding of what was happening, and he realized that this idea of racism is actually from the shaitan, and that it was our duty to spread the message of humanity and spirituality, and that we're all from Adam, and we're serving one God. He did say that if America as a whole could embrace Islam, it would solve a lot of the problems in the country between the whites and the black. But I can't see that happening. America is really steeped in Christianity, if they can call it Christianity, because I mean, Trump says that he's a Christian. Is he really? He says he goes to church on Sunday, but they've got their own brand of Christianity, and it's part of their culture. Their Christianity and their racism actually go hand in hand. They don't separate the two. I think we'll stop there, because I've got a few I've got loads more slides left, but we'll stop because I'm conscious of the time now. I've been going for quite some time. My mouth is getting dry.
Thank you very much, Abdelkarim. That was really rich subject and topic to learn a lot. And I'm sure most of the people will agree. We have some people, adults, they raising their hand. Maybe they want to, and also I encourage the young to contribute in any, even if it is something different from their point of views about what is being said. Is just to have you on board and to make you feel this is a good platform to have debate and to discuss things. Even we as adults here, and you don't agree to speak in front of us, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna give the chance to Suad. Suad, if you can unmute yourself. Okay, thank you.
Denise. Thank you for this talk. I think it's really important.
Okay, it's Lamis. She's one of the young people. Okay, Lamis, we're listening. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned about the police and how even though there's institutional racism within the police, you say not all of the police are bad. Obviously, a lot of the police are good people, but I would argue that even though the individuals within the police force a lot of them are good, the whole system is corrupt. So, what do you think about the idea of people saying there's a need to abolish the police? Or, I mean, it's more relevant in America, but what do you think about like dismantling the system? Because I mean, it's a corrupt system. You can't really fix it because it's deep rooted, like it's built on these prejudices. So what do you think about the idea of people saying that we need to completely like abolish the police and create new systems, invest in the community, and have like trained professionals to deal with different kind of emergencies?
Yeah, I think that's one of the beliefs of the Black Lives Matter. I've seen that on their website. When I think that terminology or that belief of abolishing the police means, that's quite a heavy statement. If you're going to get rid of something, then you should immediately have something to replace it. Otherwise, you're going to left with some kind of void. So I'm all ears to hearing that, but I would say, well, what are you going to replace it with? And do you have it in place? And how are you going to go about doing that? I think it's better to work, rather than abolishing the police force, work to reform it from within, rather than just the whole thing and then starting from scratch. Because where would we begin to do that? I've heard that argument before, but I've yet to see like a credible template put forward that we can actually say, well, here's something that we can replace the police with. And remember, when we're talking about the police, right, it's not just about the experiences of people on the streets, because the police do loads of things. They're involved in many aspects of the society. For example, missing children and things like that. So that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. I am one of the biggest critics of the police, especially with their stop and search policies, right? But I don't have a blinkered view of them. There is a problem. We all have to admit that there is a problem with violence. There is a problem with knife crime. There is a problem with young people carrying knives and being violent towards each other. So I do believe in stop and search. I do. I think you do have to stop and search people. What I don't believe in is the way that they're doing it and the way that they are profiling young people. They are just looking at them and saying, well, you're black, so part of that same gang or that same. Do you know, when they stop and search, they always come up with the same excuse, don't they? Oh, we've had a report that there's been a robbery and you fit the description. Now, they've been saying that since I was young. They're still saying that now. I do believe in stop and search, but it has to be done properly and it has to be done with intelligence. The police know they've got a good idea, who are these gang members, who's selling all these drugs. They know who's doing that, but they're not just doing that. They're just scoring points. as far as I'm concerned. And some of them have personal vendettas. Maybe when they went to school, they were bullied by people and things like that. And they just want to have or they're just racists themselves. So I'm not sure about abolishing the police as a whole, unless I can see a credible template or something that's going to replace it, which is just as efficient.
Okay, thank you. I mean,
do you have one? Have you seen one?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the ones that I've seen are, as you mentioned, the police deal with a lot, and they're, I mean, at least in America, they don't get that much training, so they deal with so many things like children, like suicidal people, so many different things that
mental health,
that like the people who are advocating for the abolishment of the police are saying there are different types of professionals that should be dealing with those kind of things, that know how to de-escalate a situation, that don't, you know, the police are often, there's a lot of force involved when the police are there. So that's the argument, really, like have different kinds
what's happening with the police now, I think a lot of the police now are multitasking, and obviously they're not skilled, and I think this is where the problem lies in terms of some of the violence and excessive violence that they're using, especially with people with mental health issues. I think when we're talking about, look what's happened recently in Glasgow, they just shot that guy dead. You know, somebody else who was a trained professional may have gone in there and could have, I'm saying may, I'm not saying 100%, it could have been that somebody could have actually talked him down and de-escalated the situation, but they didn't. They got a report that somebody was waving a knife around and they went in there and shot him dead. We don't know what the full report is going to be until it comes out, but I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that will come out as well at the same time. But I do agree with you that they're not fully trained in all aspects of the society, and they're quite limited in what they can and what they cannot do. And hence, this is where the violence comes in as well, I think, because a lot of them, if they come across someone who they think or seems to project that he has mental health issues, their main thing is to subdue that person at any cost, even if it means using excessive force, even if it means the person is going to lose their life, unfortunately. But yeah, it's an interesting argument that's coming out there, but I have yet to see the kind of template that is actually going to be credible and something that you can put forward and say, well, this is what we can do to replace. And if you're talking about the police, which police are you talking about? The one in the UK, the one in America, Germany, France, the one in Sudan? Which police are you talking about? Or is it just the one in England or where?
I mean, I was basing it off America, but I think the same thing can be applied to England. I think the main thing is, first of all, defunding, but then defunding invested in communities. But then defunding isn't just enough, because as we've been saying, there needs to be some kind of radical, at least reform, if not abolishment, then reform, because it's the whole system is corrupt. So you can't just continue how things are.
I don't know if you were here earlier on. Did you listen to what I said earlier on in terms of the lynchings that were taking place in America?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those people, a lot of the police force, if you in America, right, not so much in England, but you have intergenerational police in America. So somebody could say, well, my dad was a police, and my granddad was a police, or my uncle was a policeman. And a lot of these people were absolute staunch racists as well. So that tradition that they have of killing black people and lynching them, it just transferred over into the police force. And a lot of people from the Ku Klux Klan were encouraged, after lynching was deemed to be like a capital offense, they encouraged people to join the police and continue with the lynching in another form. But you're right. I mean, there have to be radical changes in America. This George Floyd incident is, to me, I hope it's the camel that breaks the straw's back. I mean, it's been highlighted, but there's others that took place as well, even within the same month. I mean, I'm sure you know about the guy that was jogging, and then the one where they went into an apartment. They went into the wrong apartment and they shot the black woman. She was inside her house and shot her dead. And the thing is, nothing happens to them. So in America, it is corrupt from top to bottom, absolutely. And they also have a quota system in America in terms of arrests as well. So the police are told that they have to make a certain amount of arrests, and then they'll get bonuses for doing that. So it's like a business that they're running as well. And not to mention that crime in America does pay. It pays the state, because once you get in prison and they put you inside there, you have to work, and you have to work for free. And many companies and factories have people in prison making things like belts, shoes, all different kind of things. So it's another form of slavery in America in a way. So it's within their interests to have crime high so that you can arrest as many people and put them in prison so they can be more productive and work for free. It's kind of similar to here. It's similar. You've got, let me not talk too much because I know other people are waiting as well, but I'll just say there was a, because I do tend to talk a lot, yeah? There still is a department in the police called as Operation Trident. I don't know if you heard of them. Now, Operation Trident are given a huge budget, 28 million every year, to investigate gun crime in England. And in order to sustain that budget, there has to be enough gun crime for them to sustain that budget. So it's within their interest to have as much crime as possible. They in many cases, and especially and they got this from America as well, a lot of the police are actually involved in a lot of the corruption, and that's all I'm saying in terms of what's going on. You know, I'm not going to say anything more than that, but I think you know where I'm going.
Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you, Lamis. Thank you very much. That was a nice debate. It opens a lot of ideas to you as young people. Okay, we have a number. There is no name ending with 947.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, hello. My name is Alamin Elias.
Yeah.
And actually, first I want to thank Karim for this very valuable session, and it really was very interesting and was very informative. And as we know, that is racism and this kind of discrimination has been exist since day one. So that means the thing is there, that them. Actually, I don't have a question, but I want just to comment. I have some comments. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
Yeah. What I want to say is regarding these issues, racism and discrimination. What I have actually realized in the last time that just we as Black people, we are African, and we whatever the name is, just actually we act of an action. That means we act, we do the reaction all of the action. But I think that could be always better if really we could make that action and continually to fight that kind of thing, you know, because if you do it continually, that means that's the kind of awareness is going on all the time. But if my reaction is just depend on an action, that means it's going to be for the short time, and then after a while, we're going to live our normal life, and then we waiting for another thing to happen, and then after that, we're gonna do something, and you know that's it. And I think it's better that for the youth. My advice for the youth, especially, is really to be more proactive than active. To be active is fine, but to be active is more finer, because this is, if you are proactive, that means you are going inside that deep in that issue, that problem, and trying also to find a solution. What is the best solution for that problem? Is always offenses and talking that problem, because the problem is there. We know, everybody will know. But we need solutions. How can we solve that problem? What's the best way we can do it? What's the best way to do it? Because as I said before, this is a kind of awareness. And as we know, that is the police men or teachers and schools and everywhere these things is happening. And that means we need really for these places where to make more actually like awareness workshops for people who have the responsibilities, like the people in charge in the police department, in the schools, the headquarters, and directors, and this kind of thing. And I think from that point, when we start from the top to the bottom, it's more easier and effective than to start from the bottom to up, because that people on there who is the one who's responsible, who can give the advice, how the people they deal with this thing, how the people they can deal with black, with white, with minorities, this kind of thing. And the last thing that I want to say, that is the best thing that also can do in life, is just to feel yourself and live your life, yeah, and not live your life and feel yourself. Because if you know, because this is yeah, you know, it has to do with like self-esteem and this kind of thing. No, I'm black, I'm beautiful, I'm fine, I'm good. Yeah, that is the way I should feel, and then I live my life depend on that feeling, but not just to feel, not to live my life, yeah, and then after that to feel it, and then with this all negativity and this thing going around, and then it's gonna be, it's gonna have impact. It's gonna have impact on me, and then with that impact, then I feel like psychologically a bit lower, and I need to do, and then maybe this is going to affect also our abilities and all this kind of skills that we have to be more developed, and then think. And I think that is the point of it. That is we need to be very, very, very aware of that ourselves. I love myself. I like myself, and I feel myself. I'm okay with myself. I think this thing is very important for us really to do it as a daily thing. Yeah, and thank you very much for this comment.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution. And anybody else wants to comment, because we watching the time, we coming almost to 3 hours, and you know the Maghrib is coming up soon. We don't want to overrun. But if anybody wants to have any suggestion, any comment for any other presentation, maybe within the same topic or subject from young people, so we can organize that. You can always get in touch with us if you don't have anything to say, but we will do from our side our best to try to organize with Abdelkarim or any other topic that might be interest you to be part of this Jalia. Okay. Anybody wants to say anything else, or shall I just hand it back to Abdelkarim to say a few words before we finish?
Yeah, there was but I don't know if he's still here, the young person, and he wanted me to talk about the word nigger as well. Is he still there?
Faris.
Faris, is he still there?
Hold on. No, I don't think so.
He's gone.
Faris, are you here?
Faris?
No,
Faris is not here.
Ah, okay.
Faris. Right. Come.
Yes.
You asked a question about the niggers, yeah? Yeah, come. He's here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your contribution, Faris? About what do you want to know about? If you want to say something, or Abdelkarim can.
No, I asked if he finds the word nigger offensive.
Do I find it offensive?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I know the history of the word, and I'm speaking as an individual. I know the history of the word and what it meant, and where it was rooted and why it was used, and the context in what it was used. And so I find it difficult that people can now take that word and then say we're now flipping it and using it in a different way amongst each other as a sign of endearment and brotherhood. Right? Now, if that's true, And if that's true, and because I know what, because you know, I know what people mean when they say that, and they say, "Yeah, he's my nigga, you're my, I love my nigga," and stuff like that. And it's not said it's not said in an, if somebody's laughing, it's not said in an offensive way, right? But if a white person says it, they're going to end up in court. In fact, before they even end up in court, you punch him in his face probably. Why is it you've got one word, and then if you say it, it's okay, but if somebody else says it, they could actually end up either getting beaten up right there and then, or be standing in front of the judge and be accused of using racially aggravated language. I think it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So, you know, I can understand the flipping of the coin, so to speak. So we're using this in this kind of way. But if it's going to be like that, then you shouldn't be offended when somebody else calls you that word as well. And it gets actually ridiculous sometimes, because this guy, I can't remember the rapper who he was. He was in a concert and he was rapping his lyrics, and he used the word nigger in his lyrics, and he brought a white girl up on the stage and she sang it with him, and everybody on social media was trashing her, even though she's singing the song and he brought her on the stage to sing the song with him. Can you see the kind of contradictions that it doesn't quite make sense? Why would one word be used for one? I can use it, but you can't use it, and it's the same word. If I use it, it's all right because it means I love you and you're my bro and everything's all good. But if another person uses it, let me ask you a question. If a young white boy walks up to you and goes, "Yo, man, nigga, what's up?" How would you feel about that?
I'll be real with you, I don't really care.
You don't care? Okay.
It's the context it's used in. If it's in a friendly way, I don't really care. But if it's meant in a racist way, that's you get.
Yeah. Again, it's context, and how do we? Again, a word. You know, how do we? Who's going to decide the context in which a word is used? Because that's to you, but other people might take that. They will take it quite. They will take it to be quite offensive. And a lot of people just would not say that. They just won't, because they know that the problems that it could cause just by saying that. They don't even say like me and you say. They just call it the N word, don't they? They can't even say it. But it's something that I think there was Ashadi, the actor. He did a good documentary about it, and he was talking about why he's not going to use that word anymore. He used to use it a lot in his rap songs, but now he stopped. And that's because he became a lot more conscious of his history and the background. Because don't forget, when those images that I showed you earlier on of the lynchings in America, that word nigger was used to describe black people then. And they used to chant when they were burning people, right? Burning people alive. They used to chant, "Burn, nigger, burn. Burn, nigger, burn." So it definitely, the context of that is definitely insulting. I don't know how these people in America, they flipped the script and everybody else has sort of jumped on top of it now. But me personally, no, it's not something that I would endorse. And, I'm open to discussion on there, but I think there's other ways in which you can greet each other. What if because do you watch football at all?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so in the stadium, when the black players are playing, what happens? Don't you hear monkey charts and the people saying monkey, monkey and all that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you call somebody else a monkey then? Would you go and go, "You're my monkey, what's going on, man? You're my monkey."
No, but that's racist. That's different. That's racist.
Yeah, but so is nigger, man. You see what I'm saying?
Monkey is commenting on their physical appearance. Nigger's not.
Nigger is talking about somebody's physical appearance, though.
Yeah, but I know. But
yeah, it is talking about somebody's physical. But I know what you're talking about, because you're actually, yeah. You can see how this can go either way, and how people can start trying to steer it in a different direction. I just know that a lot of people in America, a lot of black people in America reject the use of that word. The people that are using it the most are the younger generation, probably your age. You sound like you're young anyway. And as long as you're okay with it and you can contextualize it, it's fine. But I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in there when if somebody else says it, they can end up in a court. They can end up having a criminal record for using racially aggravated language.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Lamis.
So, I agree that like whether Black people should say it, that's up for debate amongst Black people. But when it comes to white people, it's different when a white person says the word nigger than when a Black person says the word. Because when a white person says the word, that white person is in a position of privilege. They have the power to oppress a Black person because we live in a society where Black people are oppressed. So when they say the word, it comes with the oppression. It comes with the possibility that they can, whatever they think, whatever like kind of racist things that they may think about a Black person, that actually in real life suppresses Black people. Whereas if a Black person says it, obviously it's used as a term of endearment amongst the Black community, but it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And with the Kendrick Lamar performance where he got the girl to sing along with him and she said the word, I just don't understand why white people would even. If I was white, I would not want to say that word. I don't understand why white people even want to say it. So, I mean, of course she was criticized for saying it. Fair enough, like she was rapping along with the song, but why do you even want to say it in the first place? Why is it even coming out of your mouth? You know the history behind the word. You know that you're living in a society where you have the privilege and those things. People are still being killed. People have still been treated unjustly. And there's still power behind that word. When a white person says it, and when these like everyone has as you spoke about before, everyone has an unconscious bias, and even it's so strong that even Black people, a lot of Black people actually have an unconscious bias against Black people and for white people because we're fed it from so young. So these kind of words like enforce that kind of idea. So when it comes from a white person, that's the difference. So I think the debate is whether Black people should use it, and that's amongst Black people to decide for themselves. But white people saying it, that's completely out of the question, and it's rightfully so that they should be criticized if they do choose to say it, because they really shouldn't be. In my opinion.
You know what
Thank you, Lamis.
They could actually argue that it is actually our word because we actually created the word in the first place.
Yeah, they created it as a racial slur. So Black people taking it back and flipping it and like using it as a term of endearment. That's for Black people to decide. How can you claim the word and be like, yeah, well, I was racist to you and I created that word, so yeah, I'm allowed to say it. That's just, I mean, I think that you can't really use the argument because then you're admitting that you're racist, aren't you?
Yeah.
Can I just get 1 minute because we almost done for Livina. She just came out. She was studying. She wants to contribute something. I'm going to hand over to her.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I don't know if this was already said because I wasn't here for the meeting, but there's a lot of things that surface in the internet of people saying how Black people are also racist towards white people. And I made sure I'd done my research on this before I could speak on the topic, but that's actually not possible because I feel like I heard Lamis say this, but we can only be prejudiced towards white people. Our words towards white people doesn't affect their jobs, anything to do with their lives, like serious issues. So I feel like anyone racist towards Black people, I don't know I'm not good at like phrasing my words, but
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean.
Us being racist towards white people.
We can't impose anything on them at all.
Yeah,
and let me just let me give you an example. I grew up in this country, right? And when I was young, the white kids at school, they had endless lists of racial slurs for us, right? Not just us and Asians. We had hardly any against them. So you can see which direction the racism is going in, because we didn't even have anything to say back to them. But they had all the words, gollywog, monkey. They had Yeah, but never anything list. And we didn't have anything back to say to them. So that shows you in the driving seat as far as racism is concerned, because racism as we know it today was created by white, and it is about white against non-white. That's what it essentially is. So you're right. If I call a white person a racist, it actually means nothing in the greater scheme of things because it's not going to affect anything.
Yeah.
So that's a good observation. Sorry to cut you.
No, it's fine. That's it. I was done. That was just the point that I wanted to, because I saw it a lot. And at first, I even, like, me and my sister had this debate. I was like to her, no, like, we can be racist towards white people. Like, people need to understand, like, it's equality. But then when everything started, like, with the whole Black Lives Matter movement became, like a bigger thing than it was, I was like, hold on, like, let me actually look into this. And when white people are being racist towards Black people, it's more about the color of our skin, not our, for example, like, people, what can we really say about white people? Are you don't season your food properly, like all those stuff. They're so minor compared to the racial. Yeah.
And you see, you got these counter arguments coming out saying that white lives matter as well. And it's, to me, the people that are saying that, and I've heard a few Black people say that as well, or all lives matter, they're fully not understanding what's going on. When we're saying Black Lives Matter, we're being specific. Do you understand? It's not that we're excluding anybody else's life, but we're addressing a particular group of people for a particular reason. That would be like, for example, somebody who's trying to raise money for cancer research, yeah, and then they decide to go on a marathon run, and then they print T-shirts saying donate money to cancer. You know, they print pens and all this kind of stuff, and then they do the marathon run and get all the money, and then somebody comes up to him and goes, "Yeah, but don't all diseases matter as well?" You see how silly it is. You see how silly it sounds.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, it's not excluding anybody else. It's being specific because there's a specific type of oppression that's going on with Black people. It's not just in this country, but it's global. It's everywhere, and it's consistent. It's historical, and it's systemic. It's just not the same for you to say all lives matter, white people's lives matter as well. In fact, anybody who says that, they really don't understand what's going on, and I wouldn't even waste my time talking to them, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time for us to go now. Thank you very much for being very patient and contributing, and we hope to see you again in our next session. And yeah, thanks, Abdelkarim. As always, you give us a really nice debate and discussion, and our people, our young people anyway, they are used to you. So next time maybe they might have something to prepare or to debate about, and we'll let you know. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
I hope we can do it after this lockdown. I'm hoping that this lockdown finishes soon, man.
Yeah, well, we hope so. I'm sure that there are a lot to talk about anyway when it comes to this young generation, and we will find a topic to debate about anyway.
Well, I'm sure
I will be consulting some of them anyway to say what do you want to talk about, and we'll come back to you. But thank you very much anyway.
Inshallah. Shukran.
Inshallah. Salam alaikum.
Shukran. Thank you, everyone. We are going to load this video or this lecture on the YouTube, and I will send you the link later on. Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.
Yeah, it's been recorded. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shukran.
Afwan.